because you have the Patreon program, you have an outlet for your most dedicated listeners to support you, which allows you to do some of that, like you said, Facebook marketing, upgrade the gear, and bring in some of these other talents to help your podcast grow also. I think one of the biggest things that we hear, and specifically I hear from different podcasters, is that many podcasters often feel like monetizing a podcast can be difficult and also feel like it can be a big ask to their listeners. I know with anything that's a creative endeavor, a lot of the times the creatives feel like, well, it's kind of hard for us to ask for people to buy something, or it's kind of hard to ask people to, donate to our project. It's our passion project. It's the thing that we love. But what advice would you give to a podcaster who is looking to monetize their own podcast?
One thing I would stress is look at what you're able to reasonably offer and that people want as a reward. One thing about our patron program is we have evolved it a couple of times where we realize that we may have a low value reward at a level that the donors may not care about that reward as much as they care about getting the bonus shows and things. And they were large efforts on our part. So trying to be able to make sure you can fulfill your promises to your listeners and to your donors, because when they're making a pledge, you're entering into a promise. You're saying, you give us $10 a month, we promise you're getting a bonus podcast every single month that is brand new. And so being able to fulfill that, I know when we started our donations back in 2010, I was uncomfortable asking listeners for money. One of the biggest fears I had was that if listeners started donating to our show, they might feel as like they own the show and are able to tell us what we need to say about movies. And I really have a fiercely independent streak when it comes to our opinions there. And it turned out that it was a very comfortable thing. It never happened where a listener was like, I'm taking my money away because you didn't say this thing about this movie I like. Just trying to be honest with the listeners about where the money is going and how it's being spent so that they don't think, we're using it capriciously, but to know that it's going for the embetterment of the show. In the end, when it comes to the success of the patron, I'm grateful. I mean, I don't use this word often, but all of us on the show feel blessed that our patrons are so generous with us that we're able to do this podcast that we love doing and does take a lot of our time. I mean, as a podcaster, I'm regularly spending 40, 60 hours a week outside of a day job to keep the podcast going and edit and do a couple of shows a week, record 2 to 3 shows a week, release 2 to 3 shows a week. And so it's the patrons that make that all possible. It humbles us that they donate as much as they do. And we feel a great sense of responsibility. So you ask, what do we say to people who are just starting up? We came in with low expectations, to be honest. And I would say that might be a good thing is don't think that you're going to instantly, make $2,000 a month and feel like you can then demand your listeners, oh, we need to get to this level, go do that. It's people are parting with money, and sometimes that's a really difficult thing to do. I know I had a rough 2020. There were things I had to cut back on, subscriptions I had to cut back on. Realize that you're asking people to take a couple hours of their life. If you look at dollars per hour, they work for a couple hours to get the money that they're donating to your show. Keep them in mind. Be listener focused, patron focused, and grateful for what they're giving you. And don't ever feel owed, because we don't. We just feel nothing but gratitude to those who support us.
I think that whole humility part is extremely important. And I don't think that's just for podcasters. I think that's for anybody that runs their own business, a small business, whether it's a podcast, whether it's anything else. You really touched on the point of recognizing that people have careers, they have jobs, and they're taking their money that they could be putting other places and putting it back into your podcast. The fact that you guys have that grateful streak that seems to run throughout the podcast, that is by far one of in my opinion, the most important things about monetizing, because there's so many outlets you can use to monetize. But if no one's clicking on the button, if no one's connected to the why are they doing this and where is the money going, you're not going to get support no matter how long you have it. One of my projects that I do is I'm actually a wrestling entrance theme song composer. And we work with my buddies and I work with a couple of different people. And one of the wrestlers that we work with runs a podcast that's all about wrestling toys. And they have a patron that's up and it's doing really well. It's doing really successfully. And we wanted to start up our own. And we actually asked them the same thing. Like, what would you recommend us waiting a little bit, or would you recommend us kind of launching it up front? And what they ended up saying was, as you continue to release content, like, you can just start it now, because over time, people are going to, who believe in your vision and want to support you, are going to donate to it. So it's not a matter of sitting here. And as you said, it's not a matter of sitting here going, okay, I have a patron. Now you have to give me money. It's more of, this is a way that people can help fund you, help fund your vision, and help fund the project in a way that they feel connected to. And you can continue to give back in ways outside of the mode that you're just traditionally doing. So I feel like, as we're talking about this, we're kind of getting to not just a, how do you monetize your podcast, but a higher level. How do you get people to monetize, or how do you get people to invest in your podcast? And like you said, starting off with that, I think, is super important. Just give people a reason to feel like they're connected to your podcast.
And you discussed at what point in doing a podcast do you monetize? My personal feeling would be a little bit different than yours, in that
Sure.
I feel like a show should be established and regular, so that you can't, I don't feel, come out with a very first episode and say, we have a patron set up and have expectations for it. Maybe somebody will pledge, but those expectations should be very low. I think once you've established a show that can build a relationship with listeners on a podcaster listener level, then you can look at extending that relationship. And, it may be something very simple where you do set it up and it's the equivalent of a tip jar. That's how I look at it for some of our smaller podcasts is, if you'd like to support our show, if you enjoy what we do, if you want to put $1 in the tip jar, please put $1 in the tip jar, like the piano player at a restaurant.
Sure.
But with Now Playing, it becomes a lot more complex because it is our biggest show. We offer a lot of rewards. We've been going for as long as we have. But if starting off in an earlier show, a younger show, I definitely think, again, look at the rewards you're offering at which level. Are you able to offer rewards? If you've only done 6 episodes of your show, what kind of rewards would you be able to offer that would really engage with the listeners you have thus far in? And of course, 6 episodes into a show also depends on your launching platform. I'm sure that Adam Carolla, 6 episodes into a show, is going to have more listeners than me if I start a new show 6 episodes in. But it's one of those things where, again, just I'd say be sure that you're offering rewards people want and that you're able to deliver on time every time.